Yuki versus the Sendai colony is not close at all. This is the second part after the first video of Yuta versus Kenjaku, so peep that one first and I'll decide how Yuki would fare against everybody in the Sendai colony. First, let's break down her abilities. Yuki, the final special grade, has the curse technique of Star Rage, which allows her to add mass to herself and her curse tool Garuda. It's important to say the mass does not affect her speed or her density, meaning she doesn't gain added bonus for durability and her speed is not affected by the overwhelming mass. She can also negate concepts with her ability working with imaginary mass, similar to Gojo's Hollow Purple, and this was evident in the Kenjaku clash in which Genisha was completely negated. She used Garuda, which is her curse tool, which she can apply mass onto, and it's also the perfect way for her to bypass curse technique burnout. She also showcased everything in Jujutsu bar maximum, with the use of a simple domain and reverse curse technique, showing her level of mastery, and she's an extremely well equipped fighter with some of the craziest feats in the series. Now let's see how Yuki would fare in their first matchup against Juve.
Oh my god! Whoa!
Well, that's all. Yuki punches Juve and he dies, and we move on to the next fight. With Juve being off screen or Yuta just one taps him, we have zero feats to really say what will happen. His orbital Shikigami that works like a domain could be useful, but against Yuki it's not doing any damage before she punches his head off. So the next matchup is Kuro versus Yuki. Now Kuro should do a lot better just due to his versatility and potency of his attacks. In the fight against Yuta, he used the sword to shoot out insects that spawned on contact, which ripped through Yuta's arm, so the potential damage that can occur is lethal. However, even with the earth insects cockroaches that Kurorushi used, he barely scaled to a Yuta who was in base form and was severely holding back. He didn't use partial recall, didn't even want to use RCT to the last moment, where he was caught off guard, and Yuki, who far outscales that version of Yuta and Kuro, there's nothing to suggest this fight would be close at all. Garuda generally can send all the AoE attacks due to the damage and range of effect, and one attack from Yuki should take Kuro's head off. Now, someone may say I'm overhyping her punches, but to put it into context, Yuki's first punch to Kenjaku led her to break through his guard and break the barrier in Tengen's place. Not only that, Kenjaku got blitzed, being unable to react to her, which clearly shows that Kuro is a Garuda victim. Now to the next matchup, and that would be Uro, and this is the one where it becomes a lot more interesting due to her ability of sky manipulation. I believe Uro just gets downplayed so much more because she got the short end of the stick in the Sendai colony. Not only did she get hit with a double team attack from Rika and Yuta, a lot of the major damage came from her getting caught off guard, in specific Yuta kicking her to Kuro, who ripped her arm off. And then she got cooked by Ryu's Granate Blast. But her ability is very dangerous, to be able to prevent the other user from doing hand-to-hand combat with how her attacks work. Thin Ice Missile breaking through guard, and she can send back attacks due to her ability, and that was evident with Ryu. However, will sky manipulation affect Yuki? Well, since we don't have a definitive answer to what will or won't be negated by Yuki's Star Rage, we'll use the example of Genisha to identify whether it will work. Kenjaku could still use Curse Spirit manipulation as we saw in the clash. However, any curse spirits with complex abilities that affects Yuki would all be Garuda victims. So my assumption is Genisha is a concept that targets Yuki, which led to it being negated. Meaning in theory, if she used sky manipulation on Yuki, it shouldn't affect her and she should be able to bypass sky manipulation. Another example is how Hollow Purple would interact with sky manipulation, and in my personal opinion, it would just bypass it because it's imaginary mass, meaning she can't send the attack back. Because of my headcanon on how the ability will work, Uro will most likely get severely injured from a Garuda hit, with her not being 100% confirmation on having reverse curse technique, and she really has no means to deal with Yuki. Now the damage she could do could be useful as she can bypass guard, and as we were told, Yuta used reverse curse technique for all the Sendai colony's people's big moves, and before Rika was out, Ryu and Uro had good showings. But it's important to suggest that that's base Yuta, and he was still holding back because of the civilians and the points. Of course, Yuki could hold back her output of mass if she needs the points, but if a punch could break Kenjaku's arm before her output dropped, there's really nothing to suggest Uro could survive any of these blows either, which leads to Yuki pretty comfortably destroying Uro. Now someone would say, well, how does sky manipulation interact if it doesn't bypass it? But the main reason I brought up the Hollow Purple with the fact that they've both been talked about being imaginary mass, it makes me believe that it would work in a similar concept of bypassing sky manipulation, which would just pretty much lead her to a poor result. However, what would happen if Sky Manipulation cannot be bypassed by Star Rage. This would make the clash a lot more interesting, and due to her ability of Sky Manipulation, she will be able to counteract Yuki a lot more. Being able to change the surface, preventing attacks, is very useful and be very difficult for Yuki to bypass. However, Yuki's ability with obviously Garuda gives her a lot more leeway to the fact that from what we have seen, Uro cannot use Sky Manipulation 360 around her body, meaning that there is potential for her to get jumped from other sides. A good example of this, we saw Yuta be able to kick Uro while she was off guard and send her to Kururushi, meaning if Yuki was attacking from the front and then had using Garuda to whip attacks to hit her from the back, there could be a lot more things that could help her to eventually bypass the potential workings of Sky Manipulation. More than just that, her ability allows her to get close to the user, meaning it allows for a lot more leeway for Yuki to counteract. As we've seen with things such as Thin Ice Missile, she can hit the surface, but it has to be right next to the user. Now, of course, that doesn't mean she has to touch them, which gives her a lot more leeway to leave and to continue her attacks, especially as the fact that she won't be in Curse Technique Burnout, as she does predominantly stay in the air from what we've seen in the series. However, Yuki still has a lot more leeway, and with Garuda having a long range of effect, it just seems as if eventually Yuki will have something to be able to counteract Uro, especially as Uro, as strong as she may be, doesn't have enough to me personally to be able to kill Yuki. Specifically, as I've said, she has to get close to her. So things such as Thin Ice Missile, which seems to be her most prominent attack bar domain expansion, meaning she'll have to get close, which just bodes well for Yuki, who will have to prevent the biggest weakness of having to chase after Uro. So overall, even with or without potentially Sky Manipulation, I really don't see any way that Yuki doesn't win. However, I do believe if Sky Manipulation is not bypassed, this is most definitely the toughest clash she will have, just from the way that her abilities match up against Yuki. And this leads to our final matchup with Ryu, and honestly I'm afraid to say he's probably the one who will get done the worst. This is more so because styles make fights, and Uro has more of a chance just because of the nature of her curse technique. But as we've seen in Ryu, he enjoys dessert and engaged in hand-to-hand combat, and that would be the worst decision he could make, as he'll be completely overwhelmed. I don't think I need to provide evidence to suggest Yuki's punches are doing far more damage that an equal exchange of blows will lead to Ryu getting severely overwhelmed. Moreover, his best move of Granate Blast shouldn't be a problem for Yuki for a few reasons. One, Ryu tanked his own blast and was fine right after. Yuta deflected one of the blasts, and Uro didn't even die after being on death's brink. And I don't see this as Ryu downplay, it's just one Granate Blast shouldn't be an issue to Yuki. Moreover, Yuki got cooked by Kenjaku's domain, which is 120% buff due to domain expansion. And she got up straight away and was still able to press Kenjaku in hand-to-hand combat, and if her output wasn't so reduced due to the damage, she would have done significant damage to Kenjaku. To me, there's just no way Ryu survives with any meaningful attacks on Yuki, and even if it runs in the same manner as a free-for-all rather than Yuki matchups against each fighter, Yuki just has way too much to come out of the Sendai colony with not too much difficulty. Now there's also the domain expansion, and of course we don't know what Yuki's domain is or even how Ryu and Uro's domains would work out. However, if we run the same manner that Kuro breaks the domain, this puts Yuki still at the greatest advantage. Her entire plan against Kenjaku, she said she has Garuda as a safety plan even if she gets Curse Technique Burnout. Now, a combination of Yuki and Garuda is too much for these sorcerers to deal with, and I don't see no way Yuki does not come out with a dub. Moreover, with her being able to control her output, I'm assuming she can beat them into submission in a similar manner as Yuta did, and with it being a free-for-all, it just benefits Yuki more as her abilities are just overwhelming, putting her in such a great spot, especially with the use of somebody such as Garuda. Now, that's going to pretty much conclude my thoughts on how Yuki would fare in the Sendai colony. I just believe with all the feats that she's shown, she just overwhelms all of these fighters. More than just that, none of them have anything really comparable to suggest that they can keep up with Yuki, whether that is speed or physical stats or really anything in general. The fact that her ability can negate concepts, the fact that her overwhelming mass is to be able to create so much damage, the fact that she's not against a top tier fighter somebody such as Kenjaku, and we also have to take in context how much Yuta was holding back in that clash. I believe pretty much every special grade is walking out Sendai Colony pretty comfortably and would easily come out with the points needed for the Culling Games.